My name is Mike Jensen. This is my video recording sample for Must University how I would run a grammar class and what we would talk about. First off, let me apologize. I haven't downloaded video software and used the webcam before. So I downloaded some software and I don't think it syncs incredibly well the video to the audio. It seems that the audio is lagging a bit, so I apologize if it drives you nuts watching my mouth not move with what I'm saying, but this was the software that I found, and hopefully if I do this on a regular basis you'll have a good suggestion for software that syncs the two better. But having said that, I'll start as I would present a video lecture to a classroom full of students at the beginning of a grammar class. First day of grammar class, this would be my overview, and this would be part one of what I've submitted to you. Part one would be parts of speech, the basic building blocks of English. So we'll start with that. Welcome to grammar class. We're going to talk about, we're going to start this week talking about the parts of speech, the basic building blocks of language and how they fit together, the functions they perform. But before we do that, I want to talk about several things so we're all kind of up to speed on what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we do it when we create language. Most of us, and you don't have to raise your hand obviously because I can't see you, but think to yourself, most of us think that we don't necessarily communicate all that incredibly well, especially if it comes to writing. Many people think that they don't write well. I get that all the time from students. I'm not a good writer. Well, most of us aren't good writers. And you'd think though that at this point in our lives we'd be fantastic communicators because we do it all the time. We do English all day, every day. You know, if we did nothing but math 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we'd be math geniuses. And yet we do English 24/7, and we're not English geniuses. We still use poor grammar, bad capitalization, lousy punctuation. And so the question is why? Why is it so difficult to communicate? Why is it so difficult to use our language effectively? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about why we still, even as adults or near adults, we still need work on grammar and then effective writing skills and all those things that we work on in English classes. There's two main reasons why this is so difficult for us. The first one is that communication, the basic idea of communicating, is just about the most complex thing we do to communicate with another person, right? And the fact is that's how language came about, was our desire to communicate with other people. Imagine trying to communicate with other people without language. You could use hand signals. You could, you know, if I'm driving and I want to communicate my displeasure at another driver having cut me off in traffic, I have certain hand signals that I can use because I know that that person can't hear me. But most of the time, that's a very simple thing. If we have something very complicated to communicate to somebody, hand signals aren't going to be enough. This is why language was developed in the first place. And the idea is, what we're trying to do is, when I have a thought, when I have an idea, it exists in my head. For example, I want everyone to close their eyes, and I want you to think of a house. Picture a house. And there is no right or wrong picture here. You can picture the house you live in, the house you grew up in, the house you'd like to have, the White House, doesn't matter. Picture a house. All right, now, that picture exists inside your head. Now, I don't even know how that happens, how you can see something in your head, because you don't have eyeballs on the inside of your skull. You don't have a projection unit or a screen inside there, and yet we can picture things. Right? So the way our brain works, and chemicals and synaptic pathways, we can picture things in our mind. Right, so now imagine, you can open your eyes now, and imagine that that house you saw, you want the person next to you to see that house too. Let's say you were picturing the house you want to have one day, and the person next to you says, so what kind of house do you want to live in one day? And now you want to tell that person. Right? So you get this picture in your head, and your goal is to get that picture from your head into the other person's head. That's the hard part. Now, if we lived in a Matrix world, if you remember that movie, those series of movies, where we could plug in, if I could plug a USB port, you had a USB port in the back of your skull, and I could plug into you, and I could plug into the guy next to you. You could download the picture of that house, and the person, and he would say, "Oh, I see, that's a nice house." Right? But we don't have that. What we have in our head is locked in our head. It's blocked in by our skull. And so the only way to get it from our head to the guy next to us, his head or her head, is to turn that picture into words. So we have to turn it into something that we both agree on, words that we both understand, and then I put that house into words, say it to that person, and then the other person uploads those words, turns it back into a picture. Well, there's all kinds of problems with that, right? Maybe we have language barriers. Maybe, for example, if it were a car, I've been to Great Britain several times, and in the U.S., the back of the car, you're probably familiar with this, you open up the back, it's called the trunk, right? That area in the back of the car where you store stuff and have the spare tires, it's called the trunk. Well, in Great Britain, it's called a boot, right? So if I told someone, oh, the car I really want to buy one day has a massive boot. Well, imagine if you're an American English speaker, and now suddenly you're picturing footwear, and you're thinking, I don't even understand how that would work with a car. Well, a hood, the hood that's over the engine in a car in American English is a hood. In British English, it's a bonnet. And so what if I told you then, oh, and this car has a really well-shaped bonnet. Well, the only bonnet I can think of in American English is the hat that women used to wear 100, 200 years ago. Right? So we may have language barriers that make it so that I can't turn that picture into my head into words that you kind of understand. We might also have baggage. There might be certain words that mean things to me that they don't mean to you. And I don't necessarily need to throw any of those out, but I might use words that are offensive to you and I don't even know it. Right? So language in and of itself, we have this communication process is amazingly difficult because we have to translate a picture in our head into words, and then we have to take that words and share them with someone else, either verbally or in writing, and they have to take those words and they have to turn them into a picture. And there are just a dozen different ways that can go wrong. So regardless of what language you speak, that process in and of itself is highly complicated. No wonder that we misunderstand each other regularly. Add to that then that we speak a language, English, that is highly complicated and not even really a single language when you think about it. Right? The English language started hundreds of years ago as Old English on an island in the Atlantic, right? With simple words, usually one-syllable words that pertain to the things they did. And it was a fairly common, easy, small language. But what happened then is this little island that became Britain suddenly over time had all these other influences, and the people, for whatever reason, as these influences came, they just loved to steal the language of these other people that were influencing them. The Norman invasion, the 1066, the Battle of Hastings, I think when the French conquered Britain for a time. Well, the English got even with them by stealing their language. So we have all kinds of French words now. Beef. The English had words like ox and cow. Well, now they had beef, which they stole from French. So now they could use either one of those terms, beef or cow, to eat. The Vikings invaded from the north and would come down into England and cause all kind of havoc. Well, the English got even with them by stealing their words. A lot of SK words like skirt and ski and skill come from the Vikings. So now the English had a craft or they had a skill. So they had two words for the same thing now. So they were expanding their language. But it wasn't just their language now. It was all these languages combined. When the Renaissance happened, Then they had all this new stuff, all these Greek and Latin-based words, martyr and shrine and shrift and litany, a lot of religious words, that came from Latin when the church was introduced. Then they had Galileo, and they had all these Renaissance scientists that added all these words. And so this language kept growing and growing and growing. And then when the British came to America, the British America, they met natives here, and they had natives words like moccasin and wigwam and papoose and tomahawk. And every time this happened, every time these people came in contact with someone else, their natural inclination was to simply add their words. And so this language grew. Now, the beauty of that is, depending on who's counting, the English language today has anywhere from about 500,000 to 1 million words in it, as opposed to French, which has about 75,000 words, which means that the English language is about 10 times the size of the French language. The advantage in that is that we have all kinds of words to choose from. If I'm angry, I can be angry, mad, ticked off, incensed. I have all kinds of words to choose from to match exactly how I'm feeling. The downside is I have a whole bunch of words to choose from, and these words sometimes don't work alike. Right? For example, when we're making words plural, piano ends in an O. To make it plural, you add an S. Pianos. Hero, which ends in an O, takes an ES ending. All right, here's a little pop quiz. Imagine how, if we have one boy, how do we make the word boy plural? Right? We add an S, makes it boys. Girl becomes girls, house becomes houses, dog becomes dogs. That's pretty standard. That's kind of standard English. But how do you make bacteria plural? Does anybody know how we make is it bacterias? It's obviously not bacterias. Is it bacteriae? It's not bacteriae. The fact is, it's kind of a trick question. The word bacteria is already plural. The singular, like boy, is bacterium. Bacterium is the singular. Bacteria is the plural. Right? It's a Latin root word. It acts differently than normal Old English words like boy and girl and house and dog and cat. Right? So we have all these words to choose from, but because they came from different languages and came with their own rules, now that's complicated our language just exponentially. So it's no wonder it's difficult to master English in writing and speaking, the grammar. It's tough because we have a highly complex language and we're using it to perform a even more highly complex skill, which is communication. So what we're going to do over the course of this term, is we're going to try to get a little bit better at that. We're going to learn some of the parts of speech, how they tend to work, how we put them together, how they're used, and then how those get put together into longer pieces like phrases and clauses and eventually sentences and different kinds of sentences, and some common errors and things, some common tips and tricks to help us to maybe overcome some of the most common errors that we trip and fall into. So we're going to start with parts of speech, and I've done more than 10 minutes here, so I'll go ahead and wrap this up. But that would be normally when I start most English classes. That's the type of intro that I give. Is that overall general view of why this is so hard, and that you don't have to feel bad that it's hard for you. It's hard for everybody, and there's reasons that it's hard for everybody. So I hope that works for you, and I will get this ready and send it off.